I'm thinking director. Yep, that's what I want to do.
How much does a producer make?
Did you go to school? What did you study?
What's the best part about your job?
How do I get in?
Who do I need to know?
Welcome to 101, a podcast for young women interested in careers in film and TV.
We'll sit down with industry professionals, ask them your questions, and get the answers you need to know.
101. It's a beginning.
We are here today with Matt Selkirk, DIT and cinematographer, and we will learn all the ins and outs of both worlds. Welcome to 101.
Glad to see you here today.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad we finally got a chance to do it.
I know, I don't know if our listeners know, but we are constantly, in touch with different people and scheduling and working around people's schedules and lives and jobs and kids and everything. And I think we had a couple false starts in the past couple of months with Matt.
We came dangerously close a few times.
Meredith, I'm going to let you take the first question because my dog is barking.
Oh, Dobie. So Matt, what do you do and how do you define your role?
I primarily on set, I'm a digital imaging technician. I handled like the on-set color and workflow. To describe it to people who have no idea what I'm talking about, I tell people that I'm the Instagram filter of film. And if you tell any DIT that, they're incredibly offended.
Mm-hmm, I can imagine.
But I work with the DP to kind of help set the look and the feel of what our show will eventually be.
Nice. Can you sort of explain what happens to the footage after it's been shot? Like, what is the process for the footage? I know that as a DIT, you sometimes deal with the workflow that way. Yeah,
so most jobs at this point shoot some version of RAW or log. Basically, they're the same thing, which is they are a flat, uncontrasty, uncolored version of the film. That is what's being captured by all the cameras. And then you get to choose what your contrast levels, what your colors are going to be, how you want to kind of shape that into a look. And that's kind of what I do, where I add the contrast, the color, the gamma, all that stuff to kind of give us what, our film stock, if you will. And so that's kind of what my cart does is, I make 1,000 film stocks or whatever it is. On a normal movie, back when we did film, you'd have 4, 5, 6 film stocks at some times. And, this card allows you to have an unlimited amount, which is great, but also can be very daunting.
I'm going to be the person that asks you to kind of break it down for listeners who are just brand new to this world. Can you kind of break it down even further? Like, so they're filming and, in a really basic explanation, like, can you tell me a little bit more about what that process is?
So I take a signal from the camera. So I get the image from the camera as we're doing it. So everything that I'm doing, all that coloring, all the matching of lenses and stuff like that is done in real time. But prior to that, we usually have some kind of prep or hair and makeup test or a series of both of those, depending on the size and scale of the job, that we kind of determine what our film stocks would be. And then that kind of lays the base for what we're going to do. So there's some kind of consistency between shot to shot, scene to scene. And then from there, we can kind of make adjustments and set our kind of stylistic goals, if you will.
The stock, is that different than a LUT?
No. It's just a different way of phrasing it.
Cool.
Because back in the day, because I started like 15, 16 years ago, back when I love your cup, by the way. 15, 16 years ago. So I kind of caught the tail end of film back when I was an assistant before I became a DIT. And then, you chose your film stocks, your, 5201, 5205, 5219 or whatever. And so I tend to think of LUTs in that fashion, where it's like, not that you're necessarily trying to mimic something all the time, but
yeah.
I find that describing them in that way to directors of photography and cinematographers and people, since most of the older guys came out of that world, that's the way that they instantly know what I'm talking about. Because if you get in the rabbit hole of like cube files and
Yeah, yeah.
3DLs and stuff. Everybody gets lost really quick, even though you're basically talking about the same thing.
Yeah. I'm working on a project right now with 4 cameras, and I'm just so sick of looking at this flat image. I really need some sort of LUT to put on, but haven't gotten that information yet. So
Oh no.
it will happen soon.
But yeah, but I find it really fun. I became a DIT because of that interaction, like being able to sit down with DPs and figure out what their idea of contrast and color and what they like and don't like, because I've noticed that all of us, though we think we see the world the same, every one of us sees it just slightly differently. So like, that's kind of like the fun part of the beginning of my job, is figuring out like how you see the world, and then figuring out what my version of that is so that I can match it. But like, for instance, I did that movie, The Irishman, with the brilliant Rodrigo Prieto, and he just sees the world greener than the rest of us. And so he adds a ton of magenta, or what I think is a ton of magenta, to everything. So every time I went to match something, I would match it to what I wanted. Then I'd add like a point of magenta. And usually that was kind of in the ballpark. But to me, the screen always looked too magenta. It always looked a little weird. But as long as I made it the same weird, it worked.
Very cool.
It's cool to think of people seeing the world a little greener.
Yeah.
You just briefly mentioned, why you like what you do, but was there a moment that you knew this was what you wanted to do?
I mean, I think like every kid, I kind of always was like, oh, movies seem really cool. Like, wouldn't it be fun to do that? I don't know. I was a weird kid. I like, my favorite movie, even now, is Back to the Future. And I always wanted to be Michael J. Fox, not necessarily really the actor, but like him as a person. He seemed like he had a really interesting life. And that kind of got me interested in like entertainment in general. And then I had a summer job for like 5 or 6 years in working at a performing arts center. So I saw like 50 shows a year and stuff. And I kind of thought I would do that until I realized they don't make any money. And then I was right on the edge of getting my teaching degree. And I had a conversation with my mom, who was like, this doesn't really seem like something you're emotionally invested in. What would, like, in a perfect world, what would you do? It's like, I'd go make movies. And my mom is amazing, was like, you should go do that.
Oh, Mom.
And so I went to film school, which was great. And they teach you a lot about, like what you think you want to do. They give you no practical skills to get a job, but
yeah.
But like, I knew like what I thought cinematography was and stuff. And I got really lucky. Like, on graduation day, I sent out an email to the handful of people who I knew who were working. That was just like, how did you do this? Because they didn't explain that part. And one of them said, hey, can you be here tomorrow? And I've worked in the business for 15 years since.
That's incredible.
I was literally like climbing the stairs to get my diploma on my cell phone, being like, I promise I'll be there tomorrow, but I gotta get off the phone. I'll explain. And then I was a camera assistant. I was a loader and a second, and then a first for the shortest amount of time you've ever seen, and then a DIT. But I've been incredibly lucky. Like, I did very few non-union things. When I was a loader, I loaded on Law and Order, and it was a fairly broken set. Like, it was a little soul crushing. Nobody got along. It was the saddest version of film. And when that looked like it was getting canceled, I literally did what everybody tells you not to do. And I cold called every single assistant in New York and was like, hey, I know you got a guy, but if that guy's busy and the guy after that on your list is busy, give me a buzz. And one of those guys said, hey, can you come in tomorrow? And that guy was a DIT, and he happened to be on like the biggest show in New York. And I met the nicest guys in New York, and they hired me kind of up until now. I feel like there are certain skill sets in film that apply really well from certain jobs and not others. So like loading, you have to be very type A for it. You have to be incredibly organized. You have to, and I'm really good at that. And then like seconding, like I was an amazing loader and I was a fine second. Because seconding is a lot of like people management and stuff. And I just wasn't as good at that at the time. And so I loaded, and the DIT that I worked with was starting a company and said, hey, do you want to, would you like to do this? And I always wanted to be a cinematographer. I figured the best way to do that was be to sit next to the guys who make all the choices. And so that's what I do. And I get to steal all their ideas and have like amazing conversations with brilliant DPs that I really admire and that I would never probably get to talk to if I wasn't doing this job.
I feel like you've covered like most of our questions. So thank you so much. No, I'm just kidding.
All right, this was great.
I'm like glancing down at my list of questions.
Feel free to tell me to stop talking.
And I'm like, nope, we did that one. Nope, we did that one.
Oh, this is all about you. This is amazing.
No, it's great. And
it's incredibly weird because I generally am not like a chatty person. Yeah. And so I'm not exactly sure when I'm supposed to stop.
No, I mean, it's wonderful because you've covered so many of the things. You went to film school, and I know you said like you did what they tell you not to do by calling people and saying, hey, this is what's up. Like, but can you talk a little bit more about that? Like you said that your first union gig was Law and Order, and you got your first job by calling people. Tell us about that, the things that you're not supposed to do, but sometimes it's okay to do.
I mean, the calling people, it's gotten less of a thing now, because everybody has cell phones and that's kind of how you communicate and stuff. But 15 years ago, nobody did. And it was considered kind of weird to just like randomly reach out. And I think it was also largely because of the fact that I wasn't pushy about it. I was just kind of like, hey, if everybody else is not available and you are desperate, I can do the job. And and I mean, I got really lucky in the fact that the people who answered the phone were brilliant and nice. And I still, to this day, when I get hired, there's like a 1 in 5 chance that the first time I email you, the first email that shows up is from 15 years ago when I emailed you in whatever year it was, saying, hey, I really like your work. I wish we could work together. If you ever have a chance, I'll buy you coffee. It's amazing the number of DPs who have my email from so long ago and are like, did we talk at some point? Definitely not. You ignored me. But one of those DPs is a guy who I've worked with probably 15 times now. We've known each other for 12 years. And his name is Vanya Sturgill, and he did the Gilded Age, he did Crazy Rich Asians, he did Bored to Death and 30 Rock. And yeah, first time I emailed him, he was just like, man, have we done this before? Definitely not, but yeah, and he always finds it really funny. It's like, I'm usually better about helping people. I'm like, yeah, not with me. We stumble into each other by chance.
Hilarious.
I mean, I think it's something that you have to do to get yourself out there, to reach out to people. And I think it's the way in which you do it. And Matt, I think you do it with a lot of humility and humor. And, and for our listeners, like, you have to be showing that you're friendly and open and likable and, are going to be an asset to the team. And I think, from the way you've described it, if I were to get an email like that, I'd be like, yeah, I want to work with this guy, or I want to work with this woman. So I feel like it's such a great lesson in how to present yourself and to not be pushy, but also to say, like, I'm interested.
Yeah. And I think I think the pushy part is really the thing that people worry about. But, if you send one out every once in a blue moon, I mean, that's also how I became a DIT. I was an assistant for a real long time. And then one day, I decided to go that direction, and I emailed every single person that I had met who was a cinematographer or a cinematographer adjacent, and said, hey, I'm doing this new thing. If your guy's not available, give me a ring and maybe it'll work. And one of those guys said yes. I did a commercial for him like the next day. 3 weeks later, I was in Texas on a movie with him, and I did like 4 or 5 jobs with him before before he found an LA DIT, who is also lovely. She's wonderful. But it was great. But he got me some resume lines, and he led me to other people, and that's kind of how the whole thing works.
And how did you know? Because I think that's an important lesson for our listeners and our viewers to think about. Like when you were an assistant, like how did you know that you were ready to make that leap and say, okay, I've been doing this and now I think I need to do this?
I'm not sure you ever really are completely convinced. I mean, I at that point had been working with a group of assistants that I had known for a while. And one of those guys was also a DIT who I work with still now. And I was the guy who, if we had a second unit and the whole thing was on fire, I was the guy sent over to put the fire out. And so I wasn't really that concerned about being able to do like the A to B stuff of it all. My bigger concern was the fact that you're a bit of an island as a DIT. There's nobody there to help you. And more, it involves a lot of talking and communicating and stuff with the guy who's standing next to you. And that is not always my strong point. A great story about that. When I was an assistant, I left Law and Order and I went to do the biggest movie in New York, which was Smurfs, which at the time was massive. And I got through the whole job as the loader and I get to the end. And this really lovely assistant, Zorn Veslik, pulled me aside, and he's like a legend in the business, and pulled me aside at the end. I was like, you're fantastic at what you do. You're going to have a long career, blah, blah, blah. You're never, ever going to be hired again. I was like, why? It's like, you don't talk. You're great at your job, but you don't say anything, which makes you forgettable. And this business is all about not being forgettable. And I'd spent years learning how to talk to people because of it. Wow. But it's interesting because my job is also it really fits this weird set of social skills, if you will, where there's a whole technical side of it, which is very important. But you have to know when to be quiet and know when to pipe up and when to quietly lead people to where they need to go without it being so obvious that you're doing that. I spend more time with the DPs that I work with than I do with everybody else in my life. And not by a little bit, by an enormous amount. And you got to kind of figure out, it's like having a weird 4-month marriage 3 times a year.
Can you map out sort of what a day looks like for you on set?
Yeah. So, we get in whenever we get in at call. Usually we unload the trucks. After that, you kind of set up your cart, turn on all your programs, set up your wireless, make sure everybody's kind of has all their settings and stuff to where they need to go. You have a quick conversation with the DP about, how do we want this to feel? The scene before this is slightly warmer. Do we want to stay warm? Do we want to stay cool? Do we want to do something different? Or is this kind of the middle of the story where it's all kind of the same? After that, it's a lot of techie management stuff where you're matching lenses, you're matching exposure, you're matching flare patterns and stuff if you can pull it off. It's a lot of babysitting all the stuff that you did in prep to make sure everything seems consistent. But yeah, on the day-to-day, hour-to-hour kind of thing, it's a lot of managerial stuff where you're just kind of ticking away at buttons, which is not the sexiest answer to that question. Because my job is a little bit weird in the fact that it's part tech, part creative, and being kind of the IT guy. So when things go down, you're the guy who comes in, gives it a shake.
Slam it really hard.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll work.
You turn it on and off and see what happens. I mean, I like to describe my job kind of as being like, I should either be forgotten or saving the day.
Yeah.
And if I'm doing either of those, if I'm not doing either of those things, then I'm probably doing something wrong.
You've done a great job. I mean, this is ultimately to show our listeners that this job is even a possibility. You've done a great job of mapping it out. I want to know, do you ever talk to post-production team about what you guys have done on set? Like, how do you streamline the workflow from production to post?
I mean, it depends on the job. There's usually a lot of communication with the lab and like the dailies people. So that's something that happens kind of consistently through the whole job, making sure that what we're doing on set matches what they're doing at the lab, which, you know, matches what you see on whatever streaming platform it is that we're using to check the dailies and the stills and all that stuff. Beyond that, it's very hit and miss. There are some DPs who will connect me to the final colorist and we'll have a chat just to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page. Most final colorists don't like that because they are wonderful and smart and creative in their own ways, and they don't really want to just do what I did. But others are super collaborative, and like that movie, The Woman in the Window, the Amy Adams movie, Peter Doyle, who's a very famous final colorist in his own right, came to set and hung out with us for 2 or 3 weeks, and you know, really kind of got a sense of what we were doing and how it was going to look on set. And, you know, him and the DP, Bruno Deminal, went through look after look after look, trying to figure out what they wanted to do. And in the end, it ended up just being what we did on set. And those are always kind of the fun ones, the ones where like the thing that you did ends up being the thing that everybody sees, which I've been very lucky. I've had quite a few of them that have kind of ended up that way.
That's a great segue to our next question. What is the best part about your job?
I find the whole thing really fascinating. Like, not necessarily the tech part of my job. Like, I like that part. It really fits in the way that my brain works and stuff. But I mean, I get a master class in cinematography every few months. Like, I find a new person who's doing a totally different thing. Like, I get to ask questions and be like, hey, why did you put a 216 diffusion on this instead of a 250? Why are we using half grid instead of this? You know, why this set of lights instead of this set of lights? And for me, that I really love. 1 in every 3 times, one of those guys is just absolutely brilliant and lovely and smart and willing to like ask questions and have coffee and you know, and do all the things that you hope people like that will do. And those are the fun ones where they turn around and be like, what would you do? You know, do you want a real answer? Because I would do these 3 things. And the most confident guys will usually turn around to you and go, oh, 2 of those are brilliant. That 3rd one is crap. And they'll go do the things because, you know, in the end, they get all the credit. Why wouldn't you take, you know, the best idea wins?
It's cool when you find those people.
Yeah, and I will say I've been very, very lucky in the fact that I have a disproportionate amount of great jobs as opposed to not great jobs, which is funny because like the idiom in film is that like for every 1 job you get 3 bad ones, and I have far outpaced that thing where I've had far more great jobs than bad jobs.
Well, I'm gonna play the flip side of Meredith's question. What's the hardest or most difficult part of your job?
How do I say it without getting in trouble if anybody hears this? That I find the most difficult part of the job is watching somebody do something wrong who is unwilling to listen. And granted, most of film is subjective and stuff, but there are right ways to do things. There are, you know, even technically right ways to do things. And I also, I mean, kind of in that same vein is finding people who are very talented who are not confident. They're the ones who don't listen as well, who don't collaborate as well, who like are kind of an island. And that can be very frustrating because you finish every day going, oh, we didn't quite reach our potential for whatever this was. And that I find, that's the thing that like eats away at me at times where it's like, oh, this could have been better. This had so much potential. This could have been something. which I don't know if that's a great answer. I mean, like in a technical sense, there's like, there's a whole bunch of stuff that can be challenging, but like I find that part to be very hard. Where you're watching the guy that you spend all this time with flounder, and there's nothing you can do.
Yeah. Do you think that's mostly ego, or is it just fear? Is it what do you
I
think?
think it's a little bit of both. I mean, it's especially now because it's so busy out and stuff. People are going from shooting shorts to shooting $50 million TV shows in the blink of an eye, and they just don't have the years of experience that most people acquire to get from point A to point B. What I find happens is when people aren't confident in the fact that they know what they're doing, or not even that they know what they're doing, but are not confident in the fact that they can be wrong, and that's okay. They're not willing to admit that they don't know, and that can get you in trouble. I find that it tends to come from a place of like a little bit of fear and a lack of confidence.
Got it. Well, I mean, I think it's a real, it's a real thing, because it's, when you're new, or when you're starting something that you haven't done before, or, you're trying something and taking a risk doing something that nobody's ever done before. Like there's always that leap of faith, and there's always that chance that you could be wrong. And, destigmatizing the idea of making a wrong choice. Like, I talk to my kids about it's okay to make mistakes. And, I think as grownups, we're like, it's okay for kids to make mistakes. But as grownups, like, no, we can't make any mistakes. And I think that the added pressure of being in a really fast-paced environment where a lot of people are relying on one another to get the job done, I think that adds to a lot of fear around missteps.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think the money helps either. When you're spending $1 million a day, and you go, ooh, that didn't work. We got to make a different choice. So we got to do something again. Like, especially as a new person, it's hard to look people in the eye and be like, yeah, we spent a bunch of money, but it didn't work. But usually the best people are the ones who can turn around and go, I don't think this is the way we should do it, or I don't think this tells the story, or or just simply, I don't know. The best people are the ones who can look to their guys and be like, you guys have way more experience than I do. Because I mean, every DP, even the best DPs, are only doing 2 projects a year, 3 projects a year, unless you're doing like indie films where they're all like a month. But even that, you're doing maybe 6. The people who you hire do it 11 months out of the year, 12 months out of the year. I mean, they're, with the exception of a couple of breaks here and there, and like prep, all your crew guys are there day in, day out, every day, no matter what. And even though they're not in your position, they've seen a lot, way more than you're probably ever going to see at the top of the food chain. And they're great resources, even if you hate everything that they said. At least you can turn around and be like, oh, well, this is how other people do it, or this is, you can find out the things that you don't like to do, and that at least narrows, your path. And which is a very like union crew thing for me to say, to be like, man, listen to your guys, but but it's true though. I mean, you don't. I remember having a conversation with the director of the OA, and we were the tail end of the job. He's like, man, I'm so excited this has been so long. I think it was like 7 months we had been shooting the show. And it's like, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. It'd be nice to just relax. I'm like, and what are you doing? I'm like, oh, the truck from the next job is literally backing up to the camera truck so I can wheel my gear from this truck to that truck, because I start on Monday on something else. And he was just floored by the idea that like, man, how could you not take a break? Like, there's 150 of us here. Like, there's only 6 of you guys who are taking a break. The rest of us have other jobs that start in 2 days or a week or something like that. Like, this 15-hour a day schedule, 5 days a week, is our life, not just not just like a chunk of our year, which is a hard concept to wrap your head around.
Yeah, for sure.
Can you, as briefly as you can, talk to us about the pay range for somebody in your role?
Yeah, the current union scale rate for a digital imaging technician is, I believe it's $76.15 an hour. And that is for a guaranteed 8 hours. So you work 10 minutes, you still get paid for 8. And then beyond that, there are meal penalties. After 6 hours, they have to break you for lunch. And those meal penalties are terrible for camera, but they're like $8 an hour or $8 every 30 minutes indefinitely. And then you also have penalties for dinner, which I think are slightly higher. I could be wrong in that. And those also go on indefinitely. And then, and then after 8 hours, you get time and a half till 12. And after 12, you get double time until 14. And then 14, it gets a little murky because depending on the contract and stuff, sometimes you're into double time and a half, sometimes you're into triple time. If you're in a really amazing job, you're in golden time, which is like, it's triple time, but you don't have to get to the end of every hour. So it can add up if you do a terrible enough job. You do a job that doesn't like to rap. You can make a good amount of money.
So go out there and do your worst.
Exactly.
So Matt, what do you think needs to change in this industry?
I mean, for me, the biggest thing that I feel like drives kind of everything is the race to the bottom line, if you will. That kind of, it dictates your schedule, it dictates the hours you do each day. It kind of dictates everything, and none of the things that it does are good things. Because everybody wants to hit some magic number. And that makes it so you're trying to do a 50-day shoot in 35 days. You're trying to do, a 12-hour shoot day in 10 hours. And so everything's a little bit worse. Everything's a little bit rushed. It's how people get hurt. It's how people fall asleep at the wheel. If you're trying to do, a 50-day shoot in 35 days, every day it's going to be 15 hours, not counting however long it takes you to get there and however long it takes you to get back. And, for lots of people, that could equal a 16, 17-hour day every day for however long that job is. I think everything suffers. People suffer, morale suffers, quality of the work suffers.
Your personal health.
Oh, yeah.
Let's not forget it.
Yeah, I look pretty great for being sleep deprived for 12 years. But if I sit in this chair and stop talking, I will instantaneously fall asleep.
This is the least favorite question of everybody's. So get ready, Matt.
Oh boy.
It's not bad. It's just hard. So what directors or films have inspired you or influenced your work? Do you have a favorite film?
My favorite film is Back to the Future. I don't know. It used to get me like merciless eye rolls in film school. Because everybody's supposed to have like a really artsy and interesting thing. You're supposed to say Fellini or Kubrick. And, I guess I grew up in the 80s. We listened to Billy Joel and Rod Stewart, and we watched pop culture movies. And those were the ones that, I still love. The Gremlins and the Goonies and, Back to the Future and weirdly not Star Wars. But Back to the Future was my trilogy, damn it. But those were the movies we watched on Fridays on movie night, and those are kind of the movies we watch at my house with my kids on movie night now.
Nice.
Love that.
The Goonies is one of my favorites. I mean,
the
soundtrack, the music is just chilling to my soul.
My son loved it, and I did not realize how often they casually curse. Not bad, but they say shit and they say damn, and you're just like, okay. That glanced past him, which it did. And we got slammed with he really liked the Hamilton soundtrack, and he learned a whole bunch of things he should have learned listening to that soundtrack, which is amazing.
Thanks, Lin-Manuel.
You know, he for years, like all those words just like slid right past him. And then one day he just turned around and like was like, hey, what does this mean? Oh, well, that word is the most versatile word in the English language. And I will not explain any more than that.
Oh my.
Oh.
Matt, we could talk to you forever. Thank you so much for being here and providing such insight into your world for our listeners. It means a great deal to us to just uncover these roles that people just don't know about. And, you know, a young woman in school would never know that she could be a DIT until now. So
Yeah, and I will say, everybody seems to think that like DITing is daunting, and it can be because there's like a lot of math and stuff to it. But you know, there's no test to DIT. You know, if you can find gear, whether you buy it or you know find somebody who has extra, you know, you can read a book and do it. And, you know, fake it till you make it a little bit. And you'll eventually get caught if you don't pick it up quick enough. But I mean, for the most part, it's, you know, it's a very accessible path.
excellent.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and I hope I answered something with some version of information.
I think you did better than that. Thank
Yes.
you so much, Matt. And thanks so much to our listeners. This is 101, a podcast.